When I actually got my first camera. I had moved to Aspen, Colorado after graduating from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in biochemistry and clinical pharmacology. I decided to not pursue that as my career and instead try to become a photographer. While I was in Aspen, I got a job at a camera store in order to learn about cameras and meet people, and while working there, this fellow came in who had just returned from China as one of the first U.S. tourists to visit the country. He and I were friends, and he knew that I was an aspiring photographer, and he told me that he had met a group of doctors who were doing a preliminary look at a cultural exchange between China and the United States. It was the first one since the Chinese Revolution in 1949. And the doctors had contacted him and said, "We're going, we're so excited, we wanted to touch base with you. And we're going to have NBC come and follow our journey to China, and the Chinese have just told us that there will be no moving cameras." And my friend had asked them, "Do you think a still photographer could come?" And they said, "Well, yeah, there's no problem with that." And he said, "I know a young aspiring photographer who happens to also, I think, have a degree in biochemistry." So, long story short, we connected. I connected with the doctors, and they invited me to come and document their cultural exchange, mostly photographing handshakes and maybe a few lectures and some of their teaching of Western medicine. And the agreement was that in my off hours I could go and photograph anything I wanted to within the cities we were traveling. I decided it would be interesting for me to explore Chinese traditional medicine, as the Chinese were so interested in looking at Western medicine. So among the other things that I photographed, besides street scenes in China, and at that time there were no cars, there were only bicycles, everyone was wearing Mao jackets. It was this monochromatic society of blue or green jackets. I decided that I would try to, in these hospitals where they were teaching, explore and photograph Chinese traditional medicine, which I found from a Western perspective more interesting than modern Western technique. So one day we were finishing up at this hospital. It was outside of Shanghai, and I literally noticed smoke coming out from under the door of this room, and I asked what was taking place there, and they told me it was an old traditional technique called Moxibustion. So of course my curiosity got the best of me, and I said, "Can I take a look in the room?" And they reluctantly said, "Yeah, we can take you there for a minute." And they opened this door, and there were people lying on tables with burning coals on their chests, and the room was filled with smoke, and I knew this was my opportunity to capture something quite extraordinary. At that point, I ran and got my cameras, came back, and they were very reluctant. They thought this was backwards, and that they really thought Western medicine was the most important medicine at that time. And so they said, "You can go in for a minute." And in that minute, I saw this young girl lying with these burning coals and this extraordinary scene. And I set up my camera and photographed her very stoically having these incense burning. And she was being treated for asthma. Her mother was there holding her hand, and there were other people in the room, and it was quiet and quite serene in an odd way. And so I finished the photography. I think it might have been 2 minutes. Left the room, and I remember thinking how odd it was that my lungs felt constricted and it was hard to breathe, and this was a treatment for asthma, which they said was working and successful. That 2 minutes, and this was early in my career, I think, like I said, I had a camera for maybe a year, became one of my most published photographs of China. I've now done 66 trips to China. It was just at the beginning of my career, and it's been in the National Geographic. I believe it's been in New York Times. It's been in just books. Aperture had me follow up and do more work. And so, you know, it's amazing how following one's intuition and seeing in a hospital smoke coming under a door, being inquisitive, being persistent, and trying to capture something that your gut, your intuition tells you is something extraordinary, and 2 minutes can make a huge impact on the rest of one's career.